Welcome to this space of conversations with Game Changers.
These meaningful conversations with those who we have found are connected to their purpose from within, who are able to express that purpose in a really unique way, and through that are bringing transformation to the world in different ways.
We are interested in people who aim to change the game and create new narratives that open new possibilities for them and for all of us.
We are Purpose+Motion, and we support organizations to connect with their purpose and then get in motion, in action.
The potential we help them unlock allows them to stabilize through transitions, create healthier work environments, and scale their positive impact in the world.
Enjoy these conversations.
And please let us know what you think in the comments below. My name is Pablo from Purpose+Motion, and I'm here today with Felix Falkenhan. Hello, Felix.
Hello, good to see you.
Felix is a dear friend of mine that after studying geography, anthropology, and being involved in human rights work, has been exploring the human body-mind connection and the natural principles guiding us for over 20 years. He works as a body worker, therapist, and teacher here in Berlin, and is exploring the inherent and visionary body intelligence and the dancer inside of us to embody and manifest the wildest and sweetest qualities and dreams of our lives. So thank you, Felix, for being here today with me. The conversation today is going to be about exploring a little bit more who you are, what you do, and why is this work that you do important? So just to start, Felix, can you share with us what is keeping you busy at the moment? What are you working on?
What's keeping me busy is really shown very well by the crisis. You know, I'm really dealing with how do I integrate my personal family life with the bigger picture. And we're currently moving from one place to the other and putting some roots down in a new place. And now we have this Corona crisis, and it's really at the same time calling me to think and worry and reflect about what's happening on a global scale. So it's really about finding this balance of a global situation and at the same time, you know, being more inside and at home and realizing, you know, how do I integrate these two powerful aspects, you know, basically my inner microcosmos and the bigger global macrocosmos.
And I believe that we're all trying to find ways to balance these two levels, everything that is going on within us and everything that is going on right now in this, as you say, this COVID-19 crisis. How do you do this, Felix? What do you have a regular practice? What type of tools do you use in order to balance these two different cosmos?
Well, on the one hand, I'm really using this homestay to look at my personal stuff, you know, in my relation to my son, to my partner. So I'm really dealing with the same issues that we're now facing on a social global level. So it's relationship stuff, you know, difficulties and how do I balance my needs with the needs of my family and my partner, which is essentially, you know, how do I balance individual needs of the citizens with the need of the nation or of the bigger global society. So I'm trying to really look at the dynamics, clarify them, center myself. I'm jogging regularly. I'm trying to use nature, you know, to show me how beautiful life still is, even in times of crisis. And I'm trying to grasp the pain that's also in the world and realizing, you know, that there's a lot of people who are struggling and keeping that in mind, you know, but at the same time enjoying that I'm actually in quite a good place. And Yeah, and of course discussing it with friends and trying to meditate more regularly, and doing groups like we're doing in the embodiment for social transformation.
Mhm. So what I can hear from what you say is that you have your own personal practices like meditating, jogging, and at the same time, you are creating spaces with the people from your family to talk about your needs without losing contact or the perspective of what is going on outside. It's somehow trying to find space to deal with all those levels.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, that's kind of like how I came to embodiment work and healing work, is through being involved in human rights work, political stuff, in Mexico back then, with, being in peace camps. And it's back then that I realized that I had to take care of myself also, deal with my own inner conflicts to be a more powerful tool also for social scale change on a bigger scale. So I'm basically still practicing that, yeah.
That's interesting what you say, because in my experience working with different kinds of organizations, especially with NGOs, nonprofit organizations, I see that a lot of people that work in that sector suffer from a really particular syndrome, which is trying to heal the wound that they carry within in others, trying
Exactly.
to bring some well-being to others. And in that process, sometimes they forget about themselves. They forget about that inner wound that they carry. And even though it's really meaningful, the work that they do, there is
Mm.
something that is always missing for them.
I think you're spot on. I mean, that's where I was 20 years ago. I was working in an NGO, and I was realizing the effects of corporate America on so-called third world countries, in this case, Mexico. And I realized that, after a couple of years, that I had to also clarify my personal, way of dealing with conflict. So it really goes both ways. And I was feeling the pain after having, been to a site of a massacre after it happened, 5 days after. And I was also in those communities with the people, listening to the people, some of them traumatized. And that's when I, for the first time, felt consciously, it took me a week to realize, but I felt the pain of the world. I was crying for 1 hour in a church with a friend in the Catholic Church, and then it hit me. I realized I was suddenly touched by the pain. Normally, we don't really notice, and here in Germany, we're still kind of like in a bubble in some sense. I'm not saying that many people don't have a hard time, but when I realized what's going on in some parts of the world, I realized how connected it is to my own pain. So it actually brought me in touch with my own trauma or collective information that's there of what could happen. So that's why I'm now kind of like, I'm in touch with that, or trying to be in touch with, also the dangerous aspect of the crisis. There's a positive and a dangerous. And I think we need to seize that as agents of change that we want to be, also in this embodiment scene, to really go to the edge, where we let ourselves feel, like you're saying, the collective pain or the pain of the world and other people, and realize I need to feel the pain inside of me, which is then maybe connected to my family situation or the way I grew up, or but it's really connected. And I think that's where social transformation happens, if these two realms of the society and my inner society, my inner conflicts and divergent needs, where they meet. So that to me is also the core of embodiment work, is to be capable of feeling that through and staying conscious.
This is what I was going to ask you, Felix, because I find really interesting the connections that you make between the inner world, inner reality, and the possibility that I have to create change in the world. And because
Absolutely.
I see that you moved from this human rights activist to this more body-centered expert. And I wanted to ask you, how does the tools that you use could have supported you, but could support others in healing that inner wound, healing that inner trauma, and then preparing themselves in a better way to be agents of change?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think it's really about creating and co-creating basically an embodiment technology. So a technology that helps us gain a groundedness and a stability, but at the same time, you know, like being somewhat uplifted. So really coming into body posture, but to me, embodiment always involves the spirit and the body aspect. And the mind is kind of what mediates. And then the soul gets a chance to dance with it. That's how I would maybe term it in a, yeah.
So
That's a way to term it. So it's really finding that balance in the tension field of all the dynamics of our relationships, of the global aspect of our lives, the personal family aspect of our lives, the physical aspect. How can I stay balanced and centered with breathing? And I really especially like breathing down into the ground, breathing up into the sky, and then breathing also, you know, kind of like leaning into our past, where we come from, at the same time leaning towards the future, and then being centered in the heart area and using breath to balance basically inside and outside, up and down, past and future, and centering with the conscious mind in, you know, the largely unconscious tension field of our lives, where there's dynamics that if we don't have that level of centeredness and connection, we just react automatically. We're just getting into our patterns when we're triggered. So it's really about, you know, grasping those moments where we go into autopilot, go unconscious, and don't have the conscious mind to kind of find a balance between all the unconscious processes or subconscious processes. So it's really about building that kind of technology and sharing that, and really meeting people and realizing only where we meet ourselves and others can we really change. That's where we can consciously transform. So that's kind of like what I'm trying to tackle.
That's really interesting. From what I take from what you said is that there is a practice of harmonizing different levels, is the body, the mind, the spirit, and also harmonizing different directions or pulsations that takes us grounded, going up to the sky, forward, backwards, and everything is meant to create awareness of your inner patterns, of your reactions, unconscious reactions.
Yeah, it is really about you know, basically stopping to react, finding the moment where you connect with stillness, where you find that place in space, so to say, where you can breathe again, where you're not confined by your mental concepts, by your unconscious patterns and reactions and old trauma, but where you can really consciously you know, yeah, it's really about finding that alignment, you know, that integration, which is kind of like vertical, you know, integrating matter and spirit, you could say, the physical realm and the spiritual realm, integrating, you know, on a, I would call this transformation, where we go from one self to another self. And of course, on the outside, this is resembled by another person, which is obviously another self. But we ourselves also, coming from the past, we shift, you know, moment by moment we shift. And it's really catching that moment where we repeat a pattern over and over, which has been hurtful and painful, that we can kind of like pause, bring breath into it, life into it, stillness and awareness, and then, you know, feel the energy moving in our system with our whole body. This is embodiment. And then we can start playing again, because then the soul gets space to breathe. And it's all about the capacity to feel, like you were saying, I think, mentioning at some point, this extra little bit of feeling. And it's no big deal in a way, you know. It's not, as we all know, transformation is happening anyways. It's about being conscious of it and co-creating it.
Mm-hmm. I find it very interesting because of all this not only the technology, as you call it, that you're sharing with us, but mostly that for you is pretty clear that this type of work has to be reflected in the societal level, has to be reflected in the outside, that it cannot only be an individual practice. And this is something that I really admire in your work. And that inspires me as well to keep doing the same thing. And the final question, just thanking you, Felix, for the time that you spent with us, is what would you say to the people who are struggling not only with their own individual practice, but to connect this microcosmos, as you were mentioning before? What would be the advice or the tips that you would give them in order to increase their ability to be these change makers?
I think it's really reflecting and meditating with the fact that we are actually very powerful. You know, owning the experience and not trying to blame anything on anyone. You know, like it's the bad outside world, or it's just certain people. But we're all actually struggling. This is a crisis that you know, we're all part of, and it's about, you know, accepting yourself more with any kind of feelings that you have, but also sharing it more with others, because we need community for that. You know, we need to reflect. We need to get to know ourselves through opening up more towards other people. So it's both ways, you know, opening up towards our own reality, taking the time out and really using the homestay that's still in place in some way to really arrive home, be home. And then now, as we enter into more public life again, really be more aware and just a bit more loving, maybe, and not trying to blame. Stop the blame game, stop the guilt game. You know, yeah, and be gentle with ourselves and others.
That's very, very important, to be gentle with each other and to have compassion in this moment that where all these fears are running around. So thank you, Felix, very much for the time that you spent with us, and hope to see you very soon.
Yes.
Bye.
Thank you, Pablo. Great you're doing this.